Welcome everyone to That Time We Woke Up in a Podcast and Had to Explain Manga. Our heated adventures overanalyzing manga that we find interesting. Also called the Overmangacast. My name is Sam, and on this episode, I hesitate to say we, everyone else, read Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, chapters 26-44, the end of part 1, Phantom Blood. You know, part I really like. But I don't get to be in this episode. I'm on vacation. Anyway, join Matt, Jake, and Jay for this bizarre adventure. And even if it takes 100 years, I will have my revenge.
Hello, everyone, to the Overmangacast. That time we woke up in a podcast and had to explain manga. This week we are sans a Sam. He had to go off and do some aesthetic training in India, I believe. This week for you, we have part 2 of part 1 of Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, our second part of the series. Good thing that won't get confusing.
Really self-explanatory. I'm sure there are no further parts and no weirder amounts of numbering that could confuse us at all.
It's fine. This won't be a problem at all. We've already done a part on JoJo's, so our familiarity of the series, I don't believe is changed for any of us.
I believe I had mentioned earlier, I had watched some of the JoJo's anime. I had not reached where we read previously, so this entire section was entirely new for me.
Yeah, my experience was up to part 4. Still haven't seen Venta Oreo. Actually, though, one thing I did realize, this is the first time I've actually read JoJo's, and it is a different experience. It is equally incomprehensible, but it's a different experience to read it as opposed to watch it.
And Jay, why don't you remind everyone about your familiarity with JoJo's?
Sure. So my familiarity with JoJo's, I was first initiated back in undergrad, kind of somewhat against my will, but also willing. It was weird. So
kind of fitting.
Yeah. Literally, I was recommended by several anime friends that I had, and they were like, you really need to watch JoJo's. And they were bombarding me with this every time I would run into them and start talking about things like we watch or things they were interested in. And then it culminated in one night where I was, kind of led into like one of a friend's room or whatever, and they were all watching JoJo's, and they're like, "Yay, you're here! You can finally watch JoJo's." And I was just no kidding you, like literally just, I want to say, forced to watch JoJo's for several hours straight, and I still don't even know what I was watching, but it was great. And I took a break from the series for a while, and I've kind of been exposed to it through that instance, but also through cultural osmosis. Cultural osmosis was like a fever dream. I still wasn't able to connect it, and I still didn't know what was going on. So we put on the list to read, and I've read it. I recognized a lot of the parts that I had watched in college, so I was able to follow the plot. Still don't know what I was reading, and here we are. I'm starting to pick up that that's just the mentality you have to have.
That's JoJo's for you. Yeah, no, that's what the review is for. We're going to explain what all the strange pictures were that maybe coalesce into some kind of vague story, I think, probably.
That's a lot of responsibility that I don't feel capable of.
Hey, at least we're not explaining King Crimson's power. But yeah, we're not quite that far yet. Where we had left off
was halfway between the fight with Dio. A great place to leave off that I can only assume someone who was just going off chapter titles and expected them to be reasonable arc breaks would have chosen. But here we are.
Well, it is actually a pretty good stopping point, because something that I had mentioned last time is that there's something of a tone shift about halfway through our reading last time, where like it has some supernatural elements to it pretty overtly, and it's hammy as all hell, but the very first section of JoJo's is relatively grounded in reality. It seems like a sort of like a light fantasy-esque period piece. Then it goes off the rails when, Dio starts Dioing all over the manga with his vampire powers, and
pretty amped, like description of Dio being Dio. That's a description in itself.
I think it's summarized pretty well in a later portion by Speedwagon, who goes, "It sure is weird. Before I started interacting with you two, I almost never saw supernatural things. Now it's around every corner."
And indeed, the last confrontation we had bore witness to was Jojo facing off against the first of his like major minions. Then there was a little boy. None of us really understood why he was there. He lured them towards a river, and standing on a tall pillar of stone, like the supervillain that he is, Dio announced that it was he who was responsible for this trap.
How many people have you killed to get where you are, Dio? How many pieces of bread have you eaten in your life? What?
I love that line because that is
such a good line.
It is extreme levels of ham, but at the same time, it also really goes to show how good Araki's writing is, because, you know, if you were to stop to think about it and analyze it, that's really horrifying and a really exceptional villain line. It goes into something that, again, that we had mentioned last time of like Dio seeing people as little more than livestock. You know, he's literally comparing human beings to food, and it is an excellent bit of characterization for him and how he is just, you know, I mean, like he was already a bad person before anything supernatural happened, and now he's a monster even onto that. Brilliant characterization.
And I'm sure we'll have plenty of great lines from Dio to talk about. There's the same level of degree of depth that are really good and not completely ham.
Well, about that, because there is also, as I mentioned, there's a bit of a demarcation point in our first section of reading, and then for basically the entire this section of reading. Like I remember last time there was a point where I said, now we're into the bizarre adventure. I kind of forgot about the back half of Phantom Blood. I kind of forgot that how much of a drastic change it was over time. It gets very quintessentially JoJo's very fast.
Dio becomes a cartoon supervillain.
He's like Silver Age Lex Luthor. Like he is mustache twirling evil for evil's sake, chewing the scenery. He is great.
But we cut off when they were like in the middle of their fight. They kind of finished their fight. Basically, Dio just gets bored of it after he freezes them with his. So he evaporates the moisture.
Don't think about it. I've learned just not to, just don't.
So no, he has a power that allows him to evaporate moisture, I guess. And then he takes the heat away to turn it to ice.
Yep.
They certainly explain this power multiple times. I don't understand what they mean by it.
So this is satire of we're going to give a physical real world-esque explanation that is so far removed that you might as well have just said Dio has ice powers. Because if you just say Dio has ice powers, then suddenly nothing about this is weird anymore. It's the explanation that makes it weird. And there's actually a moment later that I'm going to call out. It is like a real expression of this.
I wish Dio was the worst example of this, like making up a science-based superpower.
Oh, there's a better one later.
Zappelli basically just becomes that character.
Yeah, it's somebody else's power, but Zappelli is the one who attributes it. Like, if you had just not explained that power, it literally would have made more sense. And like that's like the whole point of it. The important thing is Dio has ice powers is the important thing to know.
And he is now bored of this fight and is just like, by the way, you know how I can make zombies? We are in the graveyard of knights. I am going to summon 2 great knights to fight you as zombies instead of me, Jojo.
Well, first he summons a bunch of knights, some of whom have horned Viking helmets for some reason.
Look,
what do you have against Vikings?
Can we just do the audience a favor and maybe just skim over the numerous times Dio summons a bunch of zombies and then they get killed and then the real plot happens? Like,
yeah, that becomes sort of the regular rigmarole for the rest of the section.
Dio summons a bunch of Junji Ito looking flesh monsters they get creamed in one shot, and then the real villains come up. Like,
yeah, and for this part, which is honestly the really one of only 2.5 major fights that we get in this section, because a lot of the fights are that, let's introduce some rabble and then immediately dispatch of them. We get Tarkus and the Dark Knight Blueford. And yes, you have to say the whole thing every time.
You have to say it with dramatic voice.
Indeed.
Everything in JoJo's is dramatic.
Guess which one gets more characterization?
Problem is, I think they get a lot of characterization on both ends. I think one of them gets a backstory.
Yeah, I think the better way of putting it is like, which one is the sympathetic character? Which one gets more pathos? I think is a better way of perhaps of putting it, because we do spend quite a bit of time with both of them. They are, they do have equal weight within the story.
Unfortunately, one of them is the big muscle-bound knight who is stronger than all other knights, and then the other one is the knight who has lots and lots of powers that do not need to be explained. Oh wait,
but we're going to explain them anyway, and it will make them make significantly less sense.
You will not be satisfied with the explanation, but we will move on without you because we do not care.
I believe it was our power scaling episode. I realized that I had been calling JoJo's a parody as opposed to a satire. Strictly speaking, it's a satire, but this sort of nonsense is where I think I made that conflation mistake in my head, because it gets wacky.
This fight might be a parody, or Araki does not care.
It could be either or a combination of both.
To actually address that fight, because it's like, in one sense, the way it's actually paced out is very, very good. It's really solid fight fundamentals. You get the establishment of the Dark Knight Blueford's powers. Jojo tries to counter them, but it sets him at a disadvantage, but he's able to turn that disadvantage into an advantage. Like, the ebb and flow of the fight is very well done. His powers is he can move his hair. It's prehensile, I guess.
Also, like, the fight starts with a bunch of characters going like, "Oh man, those knights! Any boy from England would know the." And I'm like, "But Jonathan Jostar is also from whatever."
Just don't think about it. It's just better if you don't.
These legendary knights fought for the Queen Mary against her evil sister Elizabeth.
Yes,
for Mary Stuart. I didn't bother to look up how much of this was fictionalized, whether it was between 90 and 95%. I have no idea.
Oh, you don't believe that they're all Knights of England had the trial of 77 rings, from which you fought 77 people on a mountain, gaining a ring from each of them until you were covered in so many rings you could barely move?
I believe it. Sure. We're suspending all belief here.
Yeah, suspension of disbelief is the name of the game, and anime and manga in general.
So much less taxing on the brain. Like, really?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, JoJo's, as we've mentioned, is a well-written series. If you pay attention to the parts that aren't a joke, then, there is some really good stuff there. There is also the let's enjoy the roller coaster ride, because, oh no, JoJo's at a disadvantage because he had to go into the river and there's no air underwater. But wait, there is air underwater, and JoJo uses that to use the power of hamon in the river.
And the entire reason why the river's a thing is because when we're first introduced to the two knights, the Dark Knight Blueford, his great feat of strength was he swam across a river in full armor to do battle. Cool.
You probably didn't have to do that, but okay.
And also he had prehensile hair, but that is a surprise you find out midway through the fight.
They tease it like it's like some kind of either zombie unique or minor ability, but then later on it becomes his main ability that he apparently had all along.
And they double down on its zombie power, because they're like, wait, no, human hair can't do that. He's like, when I revived, my hair must have gained prehensile powers of, do you know this one rare plant with roots that can retract very quickly? My hair is basically that. Well, that's science, so that makes sense. And I'm like, no.
No, it doesn't.
Why is this hair a plant?
They have a diagram and everything. Like, it's so dialed up to 11. This is, and I laughed so hard. I don't think the anime had the diagram of the plant, but it really does add to the absurdity of it all. Like showing the cell walls in the plant's stem is going to make this make any more sense. Of course it doesn't.
But basically, during this fight, Jojo and the Dark Knight Blueford have been quipping back and forth, and he is slowly realizing the humanity still within this zombie, because what is being awoken is the honor and knightly passion for battle.
Jojo is able to, the Dark Knight Blueford's prehensile hair binds him to a tree, so he can't use his arms to punch, and therefore it seems he can't transfer hamon, but Jojo has tree trunk-like legs that can also transfer hamon. He's able to kick the Dark Knight Blueford's sword and transfer hamon through that into his arm and take his arm off.
And as the Dark Knight Blueford is dying, he's just like, I went easy on you because I realized I wanted to die a man, and this was a true man's battle, mano a mano, not with weird demon powers. And
that's such a cop-out. Oh my gosh.
I believe it, whatever. But they're just super bro it up right now, and I'm like, cool. I will now rename my blade, which was the mighty blade Luck. In honor of you, Jojo, I shall call it Pluck. I will not explain what I mean by this. And spoiler alert, it will never come up. It will never come up or become relevant.
Well, no. They acknowledge later on that it is the blade of Pluck and Luck. That doesn't mean anything.
As I said, it never becomes relevant.
It never becomes relevant. It's
the
so
sword
absurd.
comes up again, but it does not matter that it was renamed.
But they make sure that you know it. It is still renamed. We're still acknowledging that like it means something. It just doesn't.
So yeah, that's basically the battle of Jonathan Jostar versus the Dark Knight Blueford. And I just have one question for you, Jacob. Now that we're at the end of this fight, how do you feel about the fact that what you read was basically a Record of Ragnarok fight?
You mentioned that.
There is a self-awareness to this that is, I feel. No, I do see the comparison. No, I think self-awareness is the right thing because, like, JoJo's Record of Ragnarok to some extent knows how absurd it is, but it expects a level of investment from the audience that I don't think it earns.
Okay.
Whereas, I mean, like the absurdity of JoJo's is like it sets itself up as a normal story and then goes into left field. I did see that there is perhaps some inspiration on Record of Ragnarok's part of something like this. The fight is also much better paced in JoJo's, that because the bones of the fight are really good, as I mentioned. The ebb and flow of the fight. It's just like, you know, let's show the powers and make them as idiotically absurd as possible is really where JoJo's goes off the rails. And I think, now that I'm saying that, I think that's the big difference.
Yeah, JoJo's just says color and then flash of light and then shows someone being ripped in half. Like, especially this part of JoJo's. I could not tell you any of hamon techniques. They are all make your fist glow.
The fight fundamentals being there, I think, is the important part, because that to me was the big thing missing out of Record of Ragnarok. The ebb and flow, the pacing of the fights just doesn't work.
I was just pointing out the similarities there because this is
that is and I mean, not for nothing, to a large extent. I think what I'm saying is I feel that JoJo's does what Record of Ragnarok tried, but better. I actually did notice it too, because watching the anime, I don't think that comes across nearly as much. But when I was reading it, I did actually get that vibe too.
JoJo's has like I don't know if the anime trimmed down on this. It has real bad like speech bubble explain exactly what's happening. Like that happens a lot.
Because like there was an older Stardust Crusader anime that everyone hated because it was awful. What the anime does is it actually kind of leans into the joke. Like it knows it's a satire and it leverages that, because it'll have like people will stand in slow motion and give these long sentences they couldn't possibly be giving. Like it doubles down on it in this, like, for the sake of humor.
Whereas the manga, those speech bubbles aren't like given any sarcasm. They are played rather straight. The satire is supposed to be the entire scene. What that means is you still end up reading characters repeat themselves a lot.
I think the big thing is, you know, when you read it as a satire, you can understand that, like, these ridiculously long speech bubbles are a satire of that element of, you know, comic books at the time. Like, I know in particular Western comic books were lousy with that sort of thing, unironically and uncritically. But I do think to some extent that because it's animated, that element of the satire plays a little bit better in the anime. I think it works in the manga, but not necessarily as well.
Gotcha. Well, anyway, we got to move on to the second of the two. Are they brothers? I think they are.
I think they're brothers in arms is the idea.
Yeah.
They grew up together at the very least.
Yeah. Are we talking? Yeah.
Araki.
Are we talking about Speedwagon and Zappelli?
No, what? They're definitely not brothers.
Yeah, I was just like, what are you talking about?
No. The Dark Knight Bluford and Tarkus.
I
Their
see.
backstory sure does tell us they like to work together, but after the Dark Knight Bluford's fight, they proceed to not interact with each other at all, other than Tarkus smashing the armor after the Dark Knight Bluford.
To establish that the redemption arc that the other guy had is not what I'm doing. I'm just evil.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's a brothers in arms kind of thing.
Yeah.
And once you're no longer useful to me, it's like, oh, you're dead.
So I understand that scene. Is what happened then Tarkus ran away and didn't want to fight Jojo?
No, it's that everyone else ran away from Tarkus.
Okay. But
yeah, because
why?
Initially, like, you know, Tarkus basically uses the Dark Knight Bluford's now empty armor as a projectile weapon, because of course he did. And, you know, it's like, oh my, what strength, we must reposition. And then the little boy that lured them to the river in the first place, for some reason, comes back because he had been telling people, there are people rising from the dead. And some of the people from town were like, we're going to tie you to gravestone to prove how much of a cry wolf liar you are.
Yeah, they're just going to beat up Poco, this like 9-year-old boy. These basically adults.
Yeah, they're adults. They also appear to be drunk, but
I mean, yeah, but like
a drunk adult, that's acceptable.
You know what? You're right. I didn't mean to judge. But like, yeah, what happens here is there are like 3 scene changes, like very quick in succession, and then magic bullshit happens and I get completely lost.
Because this is where we get the hang glider.
Well, no, but this is where we get the, like, smash the earth in twain and, like, did you know that the knight's graveyard was built atop a dungeon of knights that he is now raising to the surface? Quick, we need to get on top of this dungeon. Hold on, I've got a hamon technique for this exact situation.
If you thought stands where that sort of thing came from, I got some news for you.
He basically spirit bombs. And someone says life magnetism. I think Zappelli says it.
Zappelli is the one who calls it the life magnet.
Did you know that life inherently, all living things have an inherent magnetic connection? You can use this then to strengthen it, to bond other life together. And we do this to get a bunch of leaves to make a hang glider.
That is in the shape of a giant leaf.
I don't understand. I had this explained to me.
Yeah, this is in the same category as the Dark Knight Bluford's hair is also a plant now somehow. This is nonsense.
But like the Dark Knight Bluford, I can at least go like, they're trying to explain a cool thing. What they've done is just incredibly dumb here.
And again, like I said, I think this is where I started to conflate the idea of parody and satire, because this is just comical. This is just stupid.
Fallen leaves do not have life energy. They're dead. I guess Hamon treats dead things as the same as living organisms because it works on zombies, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend to try and make sense of this.
Well, you're not supposed to is the thing. It's that sort of idea of let's explain how the power set works when the explanation raises more questions than it answers. They could have just been able to make a hang glider out of leaves or something. That could have just been a power that they had, but they had to try to explain it because that was a thing that had been done a lot at the time and still is to a large extent.
Like, my thing is they do this like incredible magic to create this big set piece of this dungeon of ancient knights and stuff, and then proceed to do absolutely nothing with it because they just go into a locked room next. Like, it's why
it's extremely extra, which is Jojo's all the way down. I think during all of this kerfuffle is another case where we get. You can see the self-awareness within Jojo's because Poco, a good British boy's name, when he's clinging to Jojo's back, he makes a quip about, my God, this guy is a tree. What the hell? How is he this big?
It's established that Jojo is a tree.
It is that sort of it's not like it's pretending it's taking itself seriously, but like the hard scowl is the joke. In this other knight's training hall, which is built into the side of a cliff that you can't get to without a leaf hang glider or being an indestructible zombie, so I don't know how effective it was at training human knights. Tarkus and Jojo get locked into a chain collar death match.
they spend so long explaining this chain collar death match for me to still not fully understand.
Explain something too thoroughly or too over the top, and you just like, I can't.
Well, what's happened is they have these chains clasped around their neck. Yeah. And they're connected by a chain that goes up through the ceiling and through like a pulley system. Specifically so you can't just yank the chain and pull the other person over to you, but you can just pull them into the ceiling. So that caveat doesn't really seem to matter. But Turok does a whole spiel about like, I have faced 48 opponents in this and slain them all. I'm like, it's a fight to the death. You can, that second part's implied. I was built exactly for this game. I'm like, buddy, that's like if you're 6'4" and you just challenge people to like basketball. Like, you're not really proving anything.
One of them gets a fancy name and the other one doesn't. Which one are you supposed to be more sympathetic towards?
I love how we have two separate characters who explain why Jojo, at this point, we've seen him do incredible things, why he's unable to break a chain. They're like, oh no, the chain is made of metal. Hamon can only destroy living things. Even I, Zeppeli, master of Hamon, my fist can only break bricks reasonably. I'm like, breaking bricks is still pretty good for fist, but whatever. This door is too thick.
Well, the thing that I couldn't help but think was, hey Zeppeli, what kind of wall is that metal door inlaid to?
But yeah, like
that reads to me with intention because it's framed in such a way to give you a good look of the brick wall that they're standing in front of. Like, level of video game tropiness to it that is, it really is the kind of thing that if you're trying to take it seriously, it is pain. But at least to me, it reads like you're supposed to laugh at the absurdity. We also get a little bit of extra backstory from Zeppeli that we learn it was prophesized when he would die and the time has finally come.
He decides to say, I'm going to die at the end of this chapter. Thank you.
Got it.
Thank you for your announcement, sir.
My backstory is also going to give you context for who 3 characters are. It won't matter.
They won't actually matter, but they're gonna be there. It's important, but it won't matter.
Essentially, because we established last time that Zeppeli had been like a member of a pirate crew or something, and they found the stone mask.
Yeah. Was it a designated like pirate as in they were like rebelling against the crown, or were they just...
I think they were smugglers.
They didn't go into great detail. He was just on a sailing ship.
Doing nefarious things on a ship.
Well, they were shipping stuff for criminals is the implication, I suppose. That's why the mask was there. But regardless, he goes, I then went to India. I didn't know what to do. I was just trying to figure out what was going on with that mask. And
so
then I found...
went to the colonies where they do mystical crap and stuff.
Yeah, this was the 80s.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it leans into that hard.
It is about as culturally sensitive as an Indiana Jones movie, which Sure.
Again, I do feel like that's on purpose. That like the scowl that the series wears is the joke because
it's pulpy. I'm not going to give it the benefit of the doubt that it is mocking that interpretation. I think it's just like, yeah, this crazy stuff happens in India. Like, that's the joke, not, isn't it weird that we portray Indians like I don't think it's that forward. Considering the Chinese character we saw last time, I definitely don't think it's that forward.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's a combination of it's something that comes out of Japan, and it might be some of the anime coloring my view on it to some extent, because the joke being that look at this weird stuff that comes out of India as opposed to look at how weird it is that we depict India. Either one, given the manga onto itself, which is what we're talking about here. Yeah, I think it's a fair interpretation that it's basically a coin toss, and it's not unreasonable to view it in that uncharitable sense.
So you guys probably know this because I have not looked this up. I try to distance myself from JoJo's when I can, as difficult as that could be. So is JoJo specifically an 80s manga? It's not like 90s trying to be 80s, or was it?
Oh no, it was like a year before Dragon Ball. I think it was 82.
Dragon Ball itself, not DBZ. Dragon Ball. Yeah,
Dragon Ball specifically. Like even before Dragon Ball got big and successful, it was like a year before the original Dragon Ball. I believe it was 82 and 83. Those two series.
87.
Got it.
Really?
Yep. January 1st, 1987.
What is it in 83? I looked something up. Oh, whatever. It doesn't matter. Oh, that might be Area 88. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But yeah, no, it is specifically 80s. Because, this is to some extent, and, Dragon Ball is more like Dragon Ball is the parody, whereas JoJo's is the satire. They are coming at sort of like the same cultural zeitgeist from two different directions, though JoJo's did go strong into the 90s and 90s really, really hard, but that's much later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Regardless.
That's I guess why I conflated them, because the JoJo's, the meme is kind of like I'm familiar more with the 90s uptick, I guess.
Yeah, Stardust Crusaders 1991. It's
that's because Araki loved the 80s, in case the way he names characters isn't
to the shock of no one.
So anyway, they go around India. They find out that hamon is a magical Indian secret that Zeppeli basically says, hey, teach me the secret. And then
like typical like Asian mysticism.
Yeah. And then the Indian guru reads his future and goes like, oh, the future is awesome.
The
future is awesome.
I just love so many. That's just the podcast at large. So many like future me.
I'm just saying this was the future devil, because he essentially goes, oh yeah, I'll train you. Cool. I see how this is going to end. I'll train you.
Your death is awesome. You don't want to say yes to this, but I know you're going to.
For my entertainment, yes.
And and essentially what gets revealed is Zeppeli is destined to die. He gets trained all the way through to the final stage where the guru is basically just like, so I'm going to teach you this final technique that will allow you to see the future. But the problem is, the second you are able to see the future, you can't change things. Are you cool with that? And he's like, well, at least I'll know when I'll die, because I've been trying to find this. His explanation is because he's been working so hard to find a solution, knowing when he'll die will give him some closure.
Very interesting.
And he goes ahead with it, and he gets the power to see the future and sees his exact death, which is how he recognizes it's going to be in this room. Because I think we skipped over the bit where Poco is just like, I want to prove to be a nice, strong man. Because Poco has a backstory about wanting to be a strong man and not have his sister hit him. I feel like skimming it over doesn't matter, because it never really gets resolved beyond this scene.
It's skimmed over relative to the story itself.
Yeah. That was weird.
My favorite part is they force a child to, well, no, they suggest a child go.
They don't force the child. The child is one of those headstrong teenager types who kind of puts himself where he doesn't need to be.
They suggest a course of action, then regret suggesting it, and he's like, no, I'm going to be a big strong man, and then goes in anyway. And in like my favorite panel in our reading, the second he gets through, he gets kicked into a wall by Tara.
Some way. I mean,
this is absolutely unnecessary, overly wordy backstory that's not necessary.
I feel like that's part of the satire, though, because how many series have we had an overly wordy backstory that goes nowhere?
Yeah, because again, that's a lot of the stuff I see in JoJo's is stuff that I mean, I know 80s American comics better than I know 80s manga, just because I'm an American, you know, I know the culture I grew up in a little bit better. So it's stuff that I know was a silver and even into the Bronze Age of comics sort of thing that had been done a lot. I know a lot of that stuff was heading over to Japan, and this is absolutely satirizing that sort of thing. At the same time, it's also a fairly well done and effective backstory for the kid that, you know, I mean, like it's lingered long enough for it to be kind of funny without actually like dragging the story down. Like the thing that I personally found more like, I see what you're going for, but I don't think it landed quite as well as Zeppeli's sacrifice doesn't seem to do anything. Well, he just gets cut in half by the chain.
That's the thing. I don't think that is his sacrifice. I think he knows he's going to die by that attack. And then his sacrifice is he has to die to give Jojo his life force. I think the manga purposely doesn't tell you that. I can't remember if there's a chapter break either, because I might be parts in this reading where I get the feeling like plot was written in 1 week and then the next week something was written to explain something that got looked over in the last chapter. There are a few times it feels like an editor went like, hey, this part doesn't make sense. Oh, well, hold on. No, it does.
Here's why. Yeah. Because I mean, like I will assert that, especially when looked at it from the lens of satire, I will assert that JoJo's is objectively well written, but nothing is perfect. And Zeppeli's sacrifice doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, maybe there's something to be said about that, you know, that being a trope of like, you know, the Obi-Wan has to sacrifice himself sort of thing, which, you know, it wasn't called that at the time. But I mean,
not even Obi-Wan. This is like Chinese martial arts movie. This is a huge trope of the master with ancient techniques dies against the superior opponent and gives his techniques to his student. Like that's
the modern name for that trope is the Obi-Wan, the great master who dies to pass on the teachings to the student,
which already incorporated in, like, everyone knows it was incorporated like in Star Wars.
Yeah. Because the Obi-Wan character archetype is much older than Star Wars. It's just Star Wars because the original Star Wars movie did so many well-worn tropes well. That's the reason why it's remembered so fondly. You know, it got the name attributed to it in the modern discourse, but like, you know, there's something to be said about like maybe it's plugging at that idea that you have to kill the wise old mentor so that he can pass on his power to the student. But like,
yeah, that's how you further impress upon it, and it grows stronger. Is obviously, you know. There has to be a training arc, and there has to be a death of the old
of the mentor,
of the mentorship, and then you have to have like I'm gonna revenge my master, and then I evolve into something new and even more spectacular, and it's like whoa.
I'm gonna be honest. Ever since Zeppeli did his like, frankly, kind of random flashback to yes, I was foretold to die in this scene.
Yeah, that was really random.
I kind of felt like something in the background had like switched gear into like hyperdrive for the plot of this story, because it feels like suddenly it's just like, oh, we got to get to the end.
I feel like conceptually Zeppeli's sacrifice doesn't read quite right, is sort of what I'm trying to get at. And it's like, even if you want to say that like that's part of the satire, it didn't quite feel like that, because JoJo's has done drama in like earnest drama inside of the satire before and had done it well. It felt like they were trying to make Zeppeli's death actually tear-jerking, and it just wasn't.
like what it seems like the real sacrifice would have been was knowing Jojo couldn't beat this opponent on his own and giving his life force to like give him the power to beat him, not get cut in half and then somehow stay alive for like literally 10 minutes.
Yeah, because the fight lasts a long time before Zeppeli actually dies.
Man has an entire monologue as his lungs are hanging out of him.
He dies rather dramatically, but relatively quickly.
I'm not ashamed to admit, I laughed at his memorial page where they see him smiling over the cliff.
I mean, some of it is just the audacity of it.
I'm going to be honest, though. I'm not sure that's the satire, because I think of the time period that would have been an appropriate way to like show a character death.
It's a little too easy sometimes to use either parody or satire as a shield against right criticism. And I don't think Zeppeli's death was done right, is sort of what I'm getting at.
I would say that memorial shoot, I wouldn't even say that was typical of just specifically like Japanese culture, because I mean, I think of off the top of my head like 80s and 90s movies. We did that corny crap too. In, like movies.
I'm just saying,
just like what?
It just reminded me. One Piece has a really funny scene where they are climbing up a cliff. And the character they're climbing on top of it was like literally created specifically to walk them up the cliff. And it's really bad at its job, but it slowly gets them to the top. And when it gets to the top, it fades away because it can only live for a few hours. And everyone like starts crying over this character's death, and his face appears on the side. And two of the characters just like, guys, this is stupid. Why?
It feels like it's trying to play Zeppeli's
death straight.
It's too goofy for that. You know, whereas alternatively, if there was a case where like, you know, you had Paco at the end, like, so who was the guy in the top hat? Like that would have had that same effect as the One Piece scene you mentioned.
But then I have to remember that Paco exists. I don't want to remember Paco exists.
That's fair.
The story barely remembers he exists after he opened the door for them.
He's there in the background to confirm that, yes, this is my town. I have a sister. Do you remember I have a sister? I'm going to mention that at the beginning of every chapter and then never be thought of again.
Because Jojo gains Zeppeli's power, just wipes the floor with Tarok because he now has his like physique on top of years of training of Hamon that he inherited. So he's like top tier.
He just breaks steel with his bare hands. No superpowers, by the way.
Steel's not a living thing, so I guess. Zeppeli gives his tearful goodbye speech that lasts way too long because he has literally been cut in half. And they go to Poco's town. There is a little scene where the guy who greets them is just like, "Yep, no zombies here. You're such a good boy, Poco. We all love you. Nothing bad has happened. Turn your back on me. Aha, I'm actually evil." And Jojo is just like, "Yeah, I knew you were evil. Also, I'm really cool now. Die." And explodes.
Just immediately melts the guy. And then we get introduced to, because I've watched the anime past this point, I know one of these characters actually becomes relevant eventually, but it's functionally, at least for this section of reading, 3 irrelevant characters.
There are 3 characters who one of them attacks. He looks like Guile from Street Fighter 2.
He kind of does.
And he attacks Jojo and is just like, "Haha, I have this attack where I do a split over you, revealing my groin directly to your like strike zone."
That is pretty disarming, if I'm going to be honest.
Well, Jay, you know, some of us have different interests.
And that's incorrect, but okay.
Well, that's the same interest. You know, I guess you're not wrong. And this character then proceeds to go, "Haha, I'm not a zombie. But if I was, you would be dead. But good thing I'm not, because we're actually friends of Zeppeli. He sent us this letter several weeks ago that informed us he'd be dying on this day. Unfortunately, we arrived too late, but we also wouldn't have stopped it anyway, because we can also see the future. or they're with the guru from the flashback.
Yeah, they're with the guru who gave the prediction. I think another reason why Zappelli's death doesn't feel as jokey as the goofiness implies that it should is because the prophecy that's actually given about it is actually not a bad prophecy. It is just the right amount of both literal and vague that it's obvious once you know what it means, but it's hard to parse up to that point.
Yeah, it's pretty clear his death is played pretty straight here. Like there are things Joe's like actually parodies. Zappelli's death is meant to be taken seriously. Anyway, so Jojo's beats the not zombie Guile. I actually don't remember his name because
his name is Dyer. I only know it because I put it in my notes because I knew I'd forget if I didn't.
Okay, good to know. That's a totally real name that someone would have. Knowing JoJo's, that's probably the dude's birth given first name, but whatever.
I mean, yes, if you want to be an edgelord, I guess.
Well, his parents were edgelords, so that's the problem. But
is that better or worse than Strizo?
It's straights. The joke is that they are dire straights. This is why you need me on for these episodes. Do not drag me away from this.
This is worse. This is more edgelords than Strizo.
I'm just saying, for these three people to arrive the night of Zappelli dying,
knowing that approximately when he was going to die, and still being late for it.
They received this letter weeks ago.
Yes, it just is awful. Just don't think about it.
The coincidence of them being exactly there.
How bizarre it is. They say bizarre a lot in this section. It is everywhere.
We beat you over the head with the title. Yes.
I think the translation Viz decided to go with loves using bizarre whenever it's likely.
Even remotely possible at a basic level.
They don't use any type of synonym, like this is a little unusual, this is a little strange, bizarre. This is a little bizarre, right?
How bizarre? How bizarre?
We're trying to make the word bizarre come back, so I mean, yeah.
I guess.
What's that? Some kind of market where people can sell handmade goods? How bizarre. That's actually a bazaar.
Yes.
Another flyover section, sort of like the initial nights that Dio raised, where they have to clear out the mook zombies in the town. That
the ground is made of human flesh at one point.
Yeah. Don't think too much about that. Just yes, yes. Everything's zombies.
I'm just saying, I think we should be mindful of our own health. High blood pressure is a serious thing. I know Sam's not here, so we all really need to watch our salt intake. Some of us more than others. Some people who aren't here really need to watch their salt intake. But regardless, I'm just saying, before we eat a lot of cured meats or just participate in anything severely hammy, maybe we should take a break, get some water, and then
that's a good idea.
So
that was class.
I apologize for how long it had to go for that stupid joke, but this
is JoJo's. We couldn't do any less.
You're right. So how about everyone take a break, go get a glass of water. If you're listening to this in your car, please don't get out of a moving vehicle to go get a glass of water.
But
the power of hamon cannot drive your car, in spite of all the other things it can do.
I would not be surprised if hamon could drive a car, because an internal combustion engine counts as a living entity.
Yep. Hamon has no boundaries, really. It does, but then it doesn't.
The more oil moving through the car might actually, because hamon
it's the power of the sun. Look, we can theory craft when we get back. Let's.
We all need. I think we're all dehydrating. We'll be right back after whatever it is we put in this break. Okay, well, we're all relatively hydrated. I guess we're ready to jump into this. So, as we left our heroes, they were assaulted by 3 characters who we are told matter. Spoiler alert, they don't really. And they are joined with these 3 sages to go assault Dio's castle. There are some zombie fights in between. They are pretty much just set dressing.
Yeah. We do get a couple of scenes of like Dio doing like expressions of cruelty scenes.
You mean my favorite Dio scene?
They're and like the thing is they're great scenes. I really like them, but from a like narrative perspective, it's not establishing anything we don't already know about Dio. They're just good scenes onto themselves.
To summarize my favorite one, basically a woman is begging for the life of she's begging for the life of her baby. And please take me. And Dio says like, oh, are you sure that you wouldn't want to both be my servants? If I just spare the baby's life, I'll take you instead. But are you sure? It needs to be your decision. And she's like, you're being real weird about it, but sure, yeah, if you'll keep my baby alive, I won't kill your baby. Again, the way you're phrasing this is really weird. But
it sounds really specific.
But again, you're in a complete position of power here, so this isn't really this isn't free will deciding this. So you can do whatever you want. This is really just for your own ego. Oh, is it? Yes. Sorry, I wasn't actually listening to you. You're a vampire now.
That was
my baby.
I literally was flipping between the pages to like try to figure out how the hell this happened. Because one page she's not a vampire, the next thing she is, and I'm like, what?
It happens within a panel. You are forgiven. It's she becomes a vampire, shouts "my baby," and then my favorite panel is her eating the face off her baby. I was not
very graphic.
I was not expecting it at this point. Like JoJo's at this point had become like cartoonish violence. And this was...
It goes in and out where it's like over-the-top violence, cartoonish little like break, and then back into the carnage. And it really is off-putting every time it like flips back and forth.
I don't think you could get away with making a manga where you eat a baby's face.
I'm pretty sure it's been a while since I've watched Phantom Blood, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't in the anime. How about that?
And then Dio laughs because he is a villain and tricked this woman into killing her baby. And it's just like, well, no, you did that is the thing. 100%. You weren't directly responsible, but you did that.
He's Dio.
No, he is directly responsible personally.
Like, you're not a master manipulator here.
Yeah, I mean, no, he's a supervillain. Like, it's subtler in the first part, but this is Dio Dioing as hard as he can possibly Dio.
Adverb and an adjective. Yes.
Dio is all things.
But anyway, they fight this one guy with a bag on his head and a hole from which snakes pop out. He decides to sexually assault Poco's sister in a scene that probably didn't need to be there. And it doesn't matter because Poco's sister doesn't even need to exist as a character because they just disappear after this.
Yeah, the main characters show up before it crosses another line is really how it ends up being, and then Poco and his sister are never seen or heard from again for the entire rest of the manga.
And
I think he's in some. I think Poco's in some background shots.
I think they might even mention Poco in the wrap up, but I didn't care. But this zombies thing he's full of poisonous snakes, and
to the point where is popping out of his eye, if I'm remembering.
Yeah, he's got an empty eye socket from which snakes come out, but it doesn't matter. Everyone yells, "Those are super poisonous snakes whose bite can kill a man." And then Jojo takes bites and goes, haha, I have complete control over my blood flow, and spits the venom.
Jojo blood.
And spits the venom out of the wound.
As you do.
Yeah. You don't need anti-venom. You just need to, be Jojo, I guess.
You just have to have main character powers.
Yeah. I don't know why it's so hard for everyone else.
And despite the fact they built this giant vampire castle, they walk into the front room, they fight this guy, and then they're on the roof to fight Dio.
Well, they're on the balcony, not the roof, but
Well, they could have been on the roof.
there is strong Castlevania vibes to this.
Yeah, this is Castlevania.
And reveling in it. Are you looking up when Castlevania came out?
Because now that we know JoJo's started in 87, oh my god, 1986. This is literally referencing Castlevania.
Amazing. Oh, that makes sense, honestly.
Which is interesting because do manga have time to play games all the way through?
Would assume a mangaka would be aware of the video game culture in the 80s just because of how, like, video games in the 80s
especially
were,
in Japan.
Yeah, those were big business.
So you're saying this guy's a nerd?
Hirohiko
Yes.
Araki? Oh yes, surely. Surely.
Nerd!
Honestly, I love it. So yeah. Jojo is about to step up and fight the final boss, but we got to have somebody job for him real quick. So Dyer is his name. I had to look at my notes. Dyer.
Yes, that is a name.
Dyer walks up and uses his ultimate secret technique of getting one shot by the boss to show how powerful the boss is. Is really what happens.
So he does the exact same thing he did to JoJo, and everyone comments on this going like, oh, that was a secret technique, but now he has his arms crossed, which completely negates the weakness. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. In fact, that actually makes the weakness bigger, but whatever. But that move would have taken out JoJo if he was serious, so it surely must do something to... Oh, no, he got his head cut off.
Well, no, he gets his entire body frozen and then shattered, and the only thing that's left is his head.
Which
makes so much more sense.
You're right, that makes sense. What the head proceeds to do does not make any sense, because it spits a rose out at Dio with hamon, which I guess that part makes sense.
The rose being infused with hamon. It's the fact that the head is doing anything after being liberated from the body.
Especially spitting, because it doesn't. There's no lungs.
That's the power of hamon. You can breathe without lungs, and there's water, and there's air underwater.
Also proceeds to talk about...
Yeah, how is he talking without...
Hamon, it's a breathing technique. That's some Demon Slayer definition of breathing techniques right there. Like,
yeah, it is. Except unlike Demon Slayer, this is intending to be satire. I mean, this is 100% like, you know, because like manga will do this sort of nonsense all the time, you know. And the more there are certain series that just should not explain their power sets, and but do anyway, and. You know, this is that dialed up to a comedic extreme. Well, the thing about this whole sequence that I find the most amusing is I have not just a physical copy, but it's JoJo, so I had to be extra. I have the hardcover copies of the 3 volumes of Phantom Blood, and even in that, they pull a Keikaku means plan, because Dio in Dio's speech bubble is muda 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 with a asterisk by it. I don't know what the Shonen Jump app has. The asterisk next to it that says muda equals useless in Japanese. Because JoJo's.
I believe the Shonen Jump app specifically says something akin to muda is the Japanese word for useless.
So yeah, it's the same in both versions.
Yes.
Oh.
And then proceeds to not translate whenever Dio does muda muda muda, because that's the meme from the anime, and this was translated after the anime came out.
Well, that's actually the best part. The meme isn't from the anime. The meme is from a fighting game, a Stardust Crusaders fighting game, because that actually got released internationally without the character voice lines getting translated. So that's why Rodoro is famous too. That was well before even the Phantom Blood anime came out. So that was 100% leading into the mimetic nature of Dio as a character.
But anyway, the rose hits Dio in the eye, and he goes, "How dare you sully my beautiful face?"
Because supervillain. And
that's when JoJo starts his fight.
And it's It is quite interesting.
The sword comes back up at the very least.
We'll try to get through this as quickly and painlessly as possible. The big problem that everyone is having with Dio is that because he can flash freeze you if you make contact, if your body is frozen solid, there's no life energy going through it, and you can't transfer hamon from you into the vampire that is Dio. So Jojo, if he has contact with the inanimate sword, he can use it. If the sword then contacts Dio, he can use it as a conduit. So he's going to use the sword to transfer the hamon. But then Dio freezes the sword, like Jojo cuts Dio, but it doesn't do anything because vampires are absurdly durable. We've seen the ridiculous.
He cuts Dio in half down to the waist.
Yeah, but you fool, I can freeze the sword as well. But Jojo knew that that was Dio's plan, so he aimed the sword so that the tip would be heated up by a torch.
I think the implication he was still able to move his hands because he'd only frozen the horn, so he was slowly moving the tip. But
basically, the entire bit here is escalation after escalation after escalation.
One of the sages who arrives has a side bit where they fight some zombies, but also says something akin to, the rose was able to hold hamon because it was a living thing. This metal, he kills the zombies with a candelabra and specifically goes, because it is made of metal, it cannot hold hamon. And then Jojo proceeds to still use hamon through the sword.
Well, I can explain this because this one actually does follow its own internal rules, shockingly. Basically, the reason why the difference between the rose and the sword is if it's an inanimate object you're transferring hamon through, you have to be touching the object and the object has to be touching the target. Because the rose was a living thing, Dyer, had to look at my notes again. Dyer was able to transfer the last of his hamon into the rose and then throw the rose. And the rose could retain the hamon through the air and hit Dio.
Gotcha.
So that's also relative to the stuff of the positioning of the sword matters because Jojo can't let go of it or the hamon transfer will stop.
And then Dio's body will crush the steel.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. It's weird they have that explanation that does not affect the situation at hand, but okay.
Well, and the thing that comes up is it means that Jojo has to be within arm's length of Dio, which Dio's counterattack before he realizes that the sword is being heated up with the torch. He's able to get a hit on Jojo, and when he learns that the torch is heating up the blade so that he can't use his flash freeze trick, he then breaks the blade so that Jojo can't use it anymore.
Is this the scene, or maybe it was a little earlier, where my favorite bit of retroactive editing happens, where Dio goes, I did hold some. We grew up together, Jojo, so I did not want to kill you myself. You are the only man I respected. That's why I ran away and had those 2 knights kill you in my stead. Not because I was doing the villain thing of not seeing you die myself.
You're a little bit conflating 2 different scenes because basically and he even says that in the moment, which I mean, it is the villain thing to do this, despite what Dio is saying. He's saying that fighting for himself is beneath him. We grew up together and I respect you thing comes a bit later.
Gotcha.
But there is a bit of it was actually tactically intelligent to run away when it actually just wasn't. Yeah, he does do that here because villain.
That was the second scene I read. I'm like, that sounds like someone covering up their mistakes. That sounds like something he would have said in the moment if that's what he meant. What he did say was, I'm too busy for this. I'm going to go make more zombies.
There's a subtlety in phrasing. Like I mentioned last time, he's the perfect supervillain. That doesn't mean he's the perfect villain. That doesn't mean he's flawless. He is perfect at being the stupid supervillain that pulls crap like this. And that's what makes him so entertaining, because that's such an obvious it was really strategy all along.
Yep. But regardless, Dio is not having this plan. He breaks the sword Luck and Pluck, which is weird. I don't know why renaming the sword would make it both names.
And it also doesn't mean anything.
I don't understand why he put a P there. Regardless, the way he wrote the P looked like a D, so I thought he was calling it duck.
Honestly, that might have made more sense.
It could be anything. It could even be a duck.
Oh no.
But you see, ducks are alive and therefore they can transfer hamon energy. That must be it.
I want to see that so bad. I feel like it can go super excellently or super awfully, and I want to see both.
My sword is a duck.
Jojo, why have you duct taped ducks to your hands? Because you have frozen everything else, Dio, but ducks cannot freeze.
Because yes.
Jojo, that's literally stupid.
Shut up.
Yet it's working somehow.
You went to college for 8 years. Yeah, but not be a doctor.
But yeah, after all of this, we get the final blow. Jojo lights his hands on fire because you can't light or you can't flash freeze my hands if they're on fire.
There's strong Denji energy in that, and I can appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no, JoJo's is not above criticism, and we've mentioned that the Zappelli bit was a part where the series faltered, but like you can usually tell when it's trying to be serious and when it's trying to be silly, and this final like throw of the punch, and JoJo's putting everything he has into it, and Dio is trying to cool down his hand below ignition point, and he breaks through and punches Dio clean off of the edge of the balcony. It's honestly a pretty epic moment. It plays it straight, and I feel that it pulls it off. And
literally nothing could ruin it. No amount of stupid ass pull powers that come out of nowhere.
By the way, Dio has eye goop lasers. He just does that.
I thought they were going to do something cool, like he shot his brain out into like a different hidden body, because that would have made sense, at least, like shooting it. But no, it was literally just, I've had eye lasers this entire time.
And he shoots eye lasers. There is also another bit where Jojo steps to the edge of the balcony and he can't see Dio falling because they're up super high, because Castlevania reference, I guess. He sheds a few tears for Dio because despite everything, they did grow up together, and I think it's a strong moment of characterization for Jojo. Again, for all the goofy, for all the satire, there are cases where it takes itself seriously and it lands. And I appreciate Jonathan a lot for that as a character, that he is able to shed tears for someone as awful as Dio.
I was kind of on the fence about that, because I'm like, them growing up together, they make a huge case of the fact that they deeply hated each other and that any camaraderie they had was an act.
Yeah, but they still grew up together, and Jojo sheds a few tears over it, and he's over it. It was something that we kind of talked about last time with this idea that JoJo's presents, that like there are awful people out there, but don't let that make you think everyone is awful. And to some extent, sort of what I feel JoJo is shedding tears over is like the idea of what Dio could have been if it wasn't all fake. Like that's sort of the way I read it. And that to me is such a noble sentiment, and I appreciate him for that.
I liked the noble sentiment of his father. I think this part goes a little too close to what's the
naivete?
Yeah, it's like the Tanjiro, his inner spirits leading that guy to his heart core. Like, okay, there's two shoes, and then there's whatever this nonsense is. Like, I understand where you're coming from, Jacob, and I can get that interpretation of it too. For me, it's just like,
yeah,
you spent time making it the case that this is literally the exception to that, but whatever.
Yeah,
Jojo's a good boy. They even have not Zappelli. He's wearing the hat now, so it confuses me.
It's Speedwagon.
Speedwagon just stole a dead man's hat and like, this is my look now.
I love that nobody acknowledges the fact that Speedwagon took the hat.
I used to have a hat when I first showed up. Now I've got a new hat. But yeah, and Zeppelin is like, I can see. He's crying because they grew up as brothers. I wouldn't cry, though. In fact, I'd smile. Haha. And I'm like, this is 80s anime right there. With that, Dio is totally dead.
It's a good thing he's never gonna show up again.
Yep. Wrap it up, boys. We're done here.
Until we see the cutscene from Dio's perspective where he's just like, the hamon is crawling up my body. Better cut off my own head. Now I'm like, cool.
Dio, everybody.
Dio is Dioing. Diofully.
Extremely Dio. Just wait until we get to stands. But anyway, yeah, we get basically about a chapter's worth of wrap up that I say, I don't know something about this, but like it's very exposition-y, but I don't know, I kind of enjoyed it. It had this sense of wrapping up everything in a nice little bow, even though having watched the anime way further than this is not over. Even without Dio cutting his own head off and crap.
I would have appreciated the epilogue a bit more if it didn't have a second Dio fight. I feel like the pacing for the epilogue was like, let's move along, story, and then boat. Because essentially what happens is we get journal entries that I thought were hilarious because they're essentially like, the cops are investigating these weird individuals who are at the scene of a bunch of murders, and then they just dipped.
There are newspaper headlines because they talk about like the police are investigating a bunch of mysterious disappearances. There were some people seen at the crime scene, but we have no clues.
A third one is that Jonathan Jostar gets engaged to Erina, the girl from the first arc, who does not show up in the second part at all.
Nope.
Okay, yeah.
She got sidelined pretty hard.
But she is remembered.
Yeah, she remains important, and everyone saw this engagement coming from 100 miles away. Because yes.
Even poor Speedwagon had to acknowledge that whilst his heart belongs to Jojo, Jojo's heart belongs to Erina.
Sad. People ship it. I know they do.
I think this podcast shipped it last time.
So unfortunately, Speedwagon is a little late to see them off on their honeymoon because he accidentally runs into a group of criminals taking a sketchy vampire coffin onto the ship.
A coffin that locks from the inside. Multiple people note this.
It doesn't matter because the outside is literally like crosses and like buckle. Like it could only be a vampire coffin.
I mean, some people just have all the luck. Never have anything interesting like this happen to me.
That's an interesting way of describing it.
And Speedwagon runs into these people and proceeds to think nothing of it.
It's a good thing bizarre things haven't happened to me since I met Mr. Jostar.
We got to make this happen, Jacob. Try to make bizarre happen.
But anyway, that gets loaded on the ship. They are having, I believe they're having dinner, or it might be like the breaking away from shore celebration. Because
yeah, I think it's a dinner party for the first night on the sea.
And it's Jojo and Erina, and
they're off to their honeymoon.
Yeah, and they make a big deal of the fact that Jojo has a bottle of wine, and he has a glass of wine because he is a gentleman who only drinks one glass. And it's just like, Erina, take a sip of my wine. And she makes a big deal of like, oh no, alcohol. I've never partaken of such a thing. He's just like, well, a simple sip won't hurt you. It's like, and then as if this was an 80s PSA on the dangers of drinking, the second Erina takes a sip of this alcohol, Jojo looks over the corner and notices the Chinese guy who was the people they fought in Speedwagon's section.
Yeah.
Yes. And that was just bizarre to me because I'm like, they're Europeans. They're familiar with wine. Plus they had I'm pretty sure, a pretty elaborate wedding. And you're telling me there was no wine or champagne.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It does not make sense why she makes such a big deal of it.
And why apparently he was not aware of this.
And she takes one sip of wine. Actually, I know why it's a big deal that she says I've only ever had one sip of wine, but we'll come back to that nonsense later. The second she does that one sip of wine is when everything on the boat starts to fall apart.
The nice late happily ever after moment is dialed up to 11, and then it turns out the Orientalist trope is on the boat too. So Jojo tells Erina to go back to their cabin, and he's going to go investigate this. And of course, Dio he's in a jar now. He's travel size.
There's a big deal of like a drunk priest drops a rosary and then goes to investigate the coffin. And then
he's been instructed to convert more heathens.
It literally does not matter because this dude is dead within seconds.
Yeah, he's turned into a zombie and then proceeds to help zombify the rest of the boat.
And it even doesn't matter because Jojo breaks into the scene basically like it happens. And yeah, Dio's head is in a jar.
This is the part where we get Dio. Yes, you earnestly defeated me. Therefore, I actually respect you now. You're the only person I respect, and I'm going to show that respect by cutting off your head and grafting my head to your body.
I've already claimed it as my body, is how I'm thinking of it. Ooh, a sexy, sexy body. I'm like, Dio, is this the ship? This is a ship.
It's on a ship, yes.
It's a ship on a ship on a ship. Ships all the way down.
This is too meta even for me and Jojo, so I'm confused.
So regardless, Dio shoots his eye lasers because he's like, I honor you, Jojo, and I will give you a painless death. And Jojo blocks the eye laser. They're not eye lasers, right? He has like these weird things in his pupils that shoot liquid out, like he's some kind of like.
Yeah, and then they pan over to the fact that they show his pupils, and it's like, I don't know, that little opening on like fast food like beverage containers.
It's like that.
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense, but that's the first thing I thought of, and I'm just like, wait, what? It rips through his cornea or whatever.
It doesn't matter because despite the fact it's like shooting liquid out, they do not differentiate from eye lasers at any point.
Yeah, they're just eye lasers. The fact that they're eye goop lasers doesn't mean anything or change anything.
Jojo blocks the eye lasers, and then Dio doesn't do eye lasers again because I guess he must only have the one.
He only has the one for this scene.
The Chinese man, who I wish I remembered the name of, but the manga also didn't really care.
Did they even give him a name? I don't think they give him a name.
Considering how they treat him, probably not. But Jojo apparently stopped training Hamon in between the time because he seems very out of practice or something because he barely beats this guy. And actually,
he did also get shot in the neck, so he's having trouble breathing.
Right. But he overexerts himself. I guess it's because of what he ends up having done, but it's portrayed to the audience he just punched the guy too hard and that broke like his hamon muscle in him somewhere.
The hamon muscle.
He's like, I felt something snap inside me. I don't think I'll be able to use hamon ever again. And I'm like, okay, are you setting up like he's going to have to teach someone else in part? Because I don't know part two. So I was trying to figure out, I knew part two happened. So I'm like, how is this going to connect? Is like he going to be like an old master? And then it proceeds like 2 pages later, literally tells me what a stupid idiot I was for even thinking that. But
yeah, I was going to say, as someone who knew where this was going and what it will ultimately lead to, Erina runs into the scene.
Is now in the storage container of the ship, I guess. Yep, sure.
She followed Jojo. It's not that odd that she was able to find the place, but like Erina's got to be in the scene for it to be all dramatic because the Orientalist trope is dead. But Jojo used his hamon to puppeteer his body to stop the drive shaft of the steamship's propeller, which will cause the steam engine to explode, I guess.
Yeah. Hamon can now control the bodies of people you kill.
Yeah,
sure.
Because yep.
That's a terrifying power, but okay.
Maybe that's how he broke his hamon muscle.
Yes.
Dio still wants to steal Jojo's body, so he I think creates tentacles with his veins out of his neck stump.
He
Makes
does
sense.
something.
Yes.
He
I can only say that it either has something to do with the magical goop that came out of his eyes. Maybe that's what his head runs on now. Or
and he tries to take over. He
ends body.
He gets rebuffed, can't do it, and it's just like, well, that's fine. Good thing I have my super special coffin that is very luxurious and in a case could fit 2 human beings and also locks from the inside. And need I say more? I also know, just so happens, if you put 10 barrels of TNT, it would survive that explosion. So I'll be totally cool the second I get in that coffin. Jojo's just like, hey, Erina, get in that coffin. Also, free baby. Take that baby. That's your baby now.
This is my baby now.
There was literally just a baby whose mom just got killed. And he's like, I feel bad for that baby because I also lost my mother at a young age. I'm like, Jojo, it's cool just to feel bad for a baby. You don't need an explanation there, buddy.
You have the opportunity. You have the opportunity to save a baby who would otherwise be doomed.
No one else noticed this baby until right now. And Jojo's just like, Erina, take the baby, free baby.
I mean, do you want to put this in a 19th century like foster or orphanage system? Those things are hell.
Well, the ship is also going to explode. That also is its own kind of hell. And
you always wanted to have a baby with me, and this is the closest we're ever going to get.
Wink,
Jonathan,
wink.
I've been meaning to tell you, no time to talk about that. Go away now.
Sail away in the special coffin.
Yes.
And then the ship explodes, finally putting an end to Dio's evil schemes forevermore.
My favorite part is right before the ship explodes. Jonathan is just holding Dio, like cradling his head in his arms and just being like, no, we die together like brothers. And Dio's just like, you're really sappy, but I guess this is a cool way to go. Nope, you're already dead.
Well, because Dio was trying to reason with Jojo.
I could make you invincible.
We would be invincible together. Your power in my mind with an immortal body. And he has been dead for the last 5 minutes. God damn it. Okay, I guess the ship's exploding now.
Good thing the coffin floats, because Dio never needed air. So it's weird that he would account to have enough oxygen in there, but good thing.
As you do.
And the story ends with a little bit of a caveat that Erina reveals that along with this cool baby she just found on the ground, she was also pregnant with Jojo's child and hadn't told him yet.
Get Erina heading off to America, being picked up off of the Canary Islands, and we get in big, bold, of course, maximally dramatic letters that history might not remember Jonathan Jostar, but his family will be told of his great deeds. End of part 1. And that is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Phantom Blood.
Whoa. So, I guess we can start doing our discussion. As with all shonens, we'll do the very easy question that we have lined up for this. Favorite character, favorite fight? Jacob, how about you start us off?
So, favorite character, I will say, I feel like whilst I don't think that Dio went downhill or anything in this section, but I feel like Dio was more entertaining because how extra he was relative to the more grounded earlier sections. It created a kind of contrast that made it impossible to look away from Dio. I don't know, to some extent. And it's like, as Matt mentioned, there's a less charitable reading of the perspective that I had on JoJo's. That's totally valid, but selecting the read that is both valid and more entertaining for me, I really liked JoJo in this section. Sort of the way I read him is that he's not going to give Dio another chance, but he's sad that it's come to this all the same. And there's a kindness in that I aspire to, that I think is something that is just a good thing for the world in general. And, as much as Araki had his, misgivings about how he felt that it was hard to write the perfect Paragon, I think he did a really good job of it. Jojo never pulled his punches against Dio. He knew that Dio was never going to change his ways and he needed to be brought down, and he didn't hesitate even once. But he still felt bad about it. He still understood that he was, killing someone he grew up with and wasn't happy about it. So I really like Jojo in this section. As for favorite fight, there are a bunch of small fights, but the two big fights are, or the three big fights, I should say, are the fight with Tarkus, the fight with the Dark Knight Bluford, and the battle with Dio on the balcony. I love the bones of the fight with the Dark Knight Bluford. I think it's a very well-constructed fight. The pacing, the ebb and flow is great. But because it is so neck deep in the wacky satire over-explaining the power set nonsense, as much as I enjoy it for the craft inherent, it's not what I would call my favorite. The fight with Dio, on the other hand, because they've already explained all the powers involved up to that point, you can just acknowledge that Dio has ice powers, not think about it any more deeply because the manga isn't trying to explain it to you. And the thing I really love about that fight is actually it has a very similar vibe to the battle between Goku and Frieza, where it's so long and it's so desperate, and it very intentionally drags the protagonist and the villain to their limit. Like I personally didn't feel like it dragged from an audience perspective, but like it's a fight that for the characters just drags on, and it's like, when is this going to end? When is one of them going to run out of tricks? And it sucked me in all honesty. I'm not going to lie. I've mentioned a couple of times that, maybe some of the satire aspects work better in the anime than they do in the manga by virtue of it being in motion. Man, I got to say, I really, really liked the fight between Jojo and the final fight between well, not the final, the big boss battle between Jojo and Dio, just because it has such a punch to it.
Okay, cool. Jay, how about you? Favorite character, favorite fight?
So unfortunately, I have to echo a lot of Jacob's points. So definitely favorite character. I obviously have to say, however, my favorite character would have to be Dio again, because he's
Dio.
He's Dio. Again, favorite character does not have to necessarily be the protagonist. He's just my favorite because he's so outlandish.
It doesn't have to be the goodest character.
Yeah.
I think I've said the antagonist for my favorite character in these things like more often
than the heroes. Yeah.
The audacity. Dio brings the audacity, and I'm just like, yep. Dio is Dioing Diofully. Favorite fight, again, the big fight in our reading, the Jojo and Dio, because it is Dioing Diofully.
So you enjoyed the same fight, but for a very different reason.
Yes. This is the last time that we will see Dio. Of course not.
The parts Jacob tolerated, Jay was just there going like, yes, this is clearly the meat and blood.
Yeah, and again, there is something to be said about the skill and craft of Hirohiko Araki, that those are two perfectly valid perspectives to look at the story from. But what about you, Matt?
Just to be a little, actually, no, favorite character is the woman who ate her own baby. That was a takeaway.
Audacious.
And my favorite fight was that woman versus her baby.
That is the JoJo's answer, to be fair.
No, let's see. Favorite character in this section. I really liked the flashbacks with Zeppeli. I thought he had a lot of fun bits. I think his death was dumb, and I think the flashbacks coming out of nowhere were dumb, but I think that really put me on the road to be like, no, a lot of things are going to be dumb. Just accept it at this point. And I'm like, cool. Yeah, we can just put the foot on the gas. And Zeppeli was just like, yes, I am going to die. I'm going to give Jojo a lot of power he frankly does not deserve. And he will just be a god for the rest of this. And that kind of speeds in. And then my favorite fight, I actually preferred the second Jojo and Dio fight of our reading, because I felt like it was a little punchier. Dio was a head in a jar for most of it. It involves him explaining his escape plan that Jojo then says for someone else to take his escape plan. And then they die together. And it ends with Erina going, by the way, I was pregnant with Jojo's baby.
BT dubs, guys.
It because it was so short and punchy, made it even more ridiculous and really what I loved.
It's either that or the Dark Knight Blueford is my second favorite. They're both really close for pretty similar reasons, honestly.
So I guess our second question we got here is there was a bit of a tone shift between last time and this time, where it seems like the bizarre meter, the second they went through that tunnel with Jack the Ripper, it's like the bizarre meter just got slammed down.
You have a period piece up to a certain point, and then Dio gets the vampire mask, and it's like, it's supernatural and it's really weird, but it almost feels like it still has a foot in the door of being something comprehensible.
Yeah, I vividly remember when the biggest complaint I had about the series was Dio walking up a wall, kicking into it. And I'm like, that wouldn't support his... Is this house made out of like 3 foot thick concrete? And it didn't matter. Nothing matters compared. That was relatively scientifically accurate compared to what he does later.
And I mean, like... there is this sort of like sense of escalation because it's like you have the period piece and then you have it getting a little supernatural and then you get the mansion fight, which is kind of crazy, but still at least pretending it's grounded. Then they go through the tunnel. But I do like, there's something about like after the Jack the Ripper fight feels more normal than than the reading section we just did. And he flexed his muscles to fire knives that he had buried in his muscle groups. That feels more sane than what we read.
Jack the Ripper hid inside a horse that was moving. And you know what? I think I liked that better because they didn't try and find a scientific explanation for how he automated the horse's movement. It was just magic. It didn't tell me the horse was secretly a plant.
JoJo's is satire, and it also will sometimes, either take itself seriously or even if it's being silly, like something like with Jack the Ripper and the horse, it shows that you can do the tropes it's making jokes about, right? Maybe it's just my experience from the anime, but one thing that I've always said is that like even if you don't think that you'd like JoJo's, you should at least try out Phantom Blood because it at least has some semblance of sanity to it. The next part, Battle Tendency, is really off the rails, and then part 3 is just an entirely different story wholesale. But in all honesty, having read the manga, especially with some of the really good points that Matt made about how it's like I knew what the jokes were from seeing it in motion. It's kind of made me reevaluate how I see Phantom Blood as the almost kind of a little bit normal one, because JoJo's turns into JoJo's really fast.
I mean, if you're saying Phantom Blood is like the more serious JoJo's, it doesn't even really survive the like childhood arc. It gets to the fight with Dio in the mansion, and that could conceivably be taken seriously. And the coolest and most serious it gets is Dio saying his lines about pieces of bread, and then it goes full ham.
At the very least, to some extent, I kind of want to rewatch Phantom Blood now to a little bit because I remember I experienced it first in anime form, and maybe I just wasn't paying that close attention, but the level of ham kind of shocked me.
Yeah, JoJo's is definitely not kosher. Jay, you got any opinions about how bizarre this adventure has become?
I mean, I can't really add anything more than what I've already said, guys. Like literally, it's in any type of format, whether I'm watching it or I'm reading it, I come away with the same sentiment. What the crap did I just read or watch?
Well, okay. Fair. I guess, and that's as good of a transition as any into the question we always ask at the end of these. And let's start with you, Jay. Would you continue reading into part 2 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure?
I already have, as we all know.
Muzzle top.
Okay. Jacob, same question.
So I have some pretty strong opinions about the direction, my knowledge from the anime when it comes to both Battle Tendency and Stardust Crusaders, but because of the stuff that we've discussed over the course of this podcast, I'm honestly all the more jazzed to read more of JoJo's, especially in this context where, I'm reading it seriously and we're going to discuss it on the podcast because it's JoJo's. Like, you both expect everything from it and nothing from it, and it always manages to surprise you. And not even necessarily in the sense that, like, this is the best thing I've ever read, because I kind of started to see some flaws I didn't notice before, but it kind of makes me want to read it more just because of how insane it is. So,
and finally, Matt here. So yeah, I think it's obvious from how I've been talking about it. The fact that I considered the final fight to be my favorite, I am digging the direction it goes in. I'm gonna be honest, I got a little bored during the Dark Knight Bluford and Tarkus arcs, not because there was anything really wrong with either, but I felt like the pacing in those two was really slow compared to what I'd been expecting.
It's very hard battle anime paced.
It felt like those two fights were it trying to be a serious battle anime for a bit, and then realizing they didn't want to do that, and then went step on the gas Dio fight of nonsense. I can appreciate that, because if I like hard power systems, JoJo's is not good at that.
It's not. Yeah, it's not built for it, and it's not Araki's strength.
Yeah, so I'm excited to go even crazier, even more bizarre. I'm sure stands will be fun. I don't think those are the next part, though. So
they are not the next part. Knowing what I know in my opinions about Battle Tendency, you are either going to absolutely freaking love Battle Tendency, or it's going to lose you very fast. I think the former, but we'll have to see.
We'll have to see. And with that, we'll bring this episode to a merciful close. As always, we are the Over Manga Cast. If you enjoyed listening to us, we always appreciate reviews. You can do so on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice. You can also reach out to us personally at Over Manga Cast on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Basically, we love hearing from you. Send us a message. You can also email us overmangacast@gmail.com.
Give us some suggestions on other stuff we can read. We always like weaving those in when we can.
We're short of Sam here, so our normal back and forth is a little disturbed. Jay, you want to let the people know what we're reading next week?
We'll be reading Platinum End. This is our second revisit, and it'll be chapters 15 to 27. Bound to be a good one.
I'm quivering with, we'll call it anticipation instead of fear.
Can it be both? Anticipated fear?
Guys, I hope Cancer Dad doesn't die, but also he's probably going to die.
Well, you'll have to tune in next week to find out, folks. Or, just read Platinum End. I'd recommend reading it.
Read it. It's beautiful.
See y'all next week, folks. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Guys, did we remember to unlock the door that Sam was? Oh no.
No, we don't need to.
Cut off the recording. I got hang on.
Well, yeah, gotta get the hose.